Well, chapter 8 was exciting, Anthony. It's tremendous, and loved all that business about there's only one who is God, the Father. It's lovely.
I love the Shema being repeated and affirmed by Paul.
Absolutely, that's right. And he didn't split it or mess with it in any sense. It's intact.
And now he's in line with Jesus. Isn't that wonderful?
I love
Paul
that.
is not contradicting Jesus or his whole Pharisaic background would be at stake here.
Yes. And he would have to be explaining himself muchly, which he doesn't do. He's right on track,
Right on track. It's like asking me why when I sing the national anthem in England, I'm not singing the Stars and Stripes, and I'm singing God Save Our Gracious
That's right.
And these are just common sense things.
Yes, of course. And the same here. They're not talking about a three-person God, because at that time, no one knew anything about a three-person God. That had never been heard of, never been thought of. Until after biblical times.
Absolutely.
And then people who came to that in post-biblical times, now they're trying to reimpose it. Say, well, it must be in the Bible, but it's not.
Right.
It never was.
There are some unfortunate Kabbalistic, that's mystical Judaism.
Yes.
That hinted at three, so there's always an exception.
Of course.
That's not standard Judaism at all.
That's right.
And we want to avoid the Kabbalah because it's mystical stuff.
Yes, not to be taken seriously, I think, other than the fact it is dangerous, I think. That's right.
Absolutely right. So the thing in Genesis 19:24 where Yahweh rained brimstone from Yahweh, the earliest church fathers, this is the crime scene, used that to produce two members of the Godhead, two Yahwehs, in fact. But nobody in his senses in scholarship today should imagine using this.
On my lands.
Because Solomon gathered people to Solomon.
Yes.
That doesn't prove there were two Solomons.
Yes.
It's as easy as that.
Yes.
Okay.
Wow. The 9th chapter then, and Paul continues with his instruction and wisdom and teaching and helping the folks to see through and come through problems that they've been having.
Yes.
Due to their being, as he says, really carnal-minded.
Yes.
I can't speak to you as spiritual.
Yes.
So he's trying to help them to become spiritual.
To make them grow up.
I like that.
I love that. They are Christians now.
Oh, yeah.
They're baptized members.
He never questions that.
But
that's right. He never questions their baptism.
That's right.
All of that's in order. Everything is fine.
But growth is needed.
That's right.
In all these areas.
Yes, absolutely. And as we'd mentioned earlier, I think in that sense, even though there were spiritual gifts operating among these people, we don't find where that it's the person speaking in tongues or even interpreting or the person who's prophesying who's setting these things in order. It is an apostle of Jesus Christ who's bringing these things.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, I love it.
I think that's a new point to me.
It's a good thought.
Very good thought, yes.
Chapter 9, verse 1. Am I not free? Am I not an apostle? Have I not seen Jesus our Lord? Are not you my workmanship in the Lord? Wow. Verse 2. If to others I am not an apostle, at least I am to you, for you are the seal of my apostleship in the Lord. 3. This is my defense to those who would examine me. Do we not have the right to eat and drink? Do we not have the right to take along a believing wife, as do the other apostles and the brothers of the Lord and Cephas? Or is it only Barnabas and I who have no right to refrain from working for a living? Wow. Who serves as a soldier at his own expense? Who plants a vineyard without eating any of its fruit? Or who tends a flock without getting some of the milk? Wow. So he's, I think he's addressing some who have been critical of him.
Certainly, yes.
And possibly he's saying, we've not taken money from you, and we've operated at our own expense and own service in the gospel.
Yes.
And he said, but don't misunderstand. He said, that doesn't mean we're not apostles.
No.
It doesn't mean we're not.
No.
We could be doing this.
We could. We have a right, in
That's
fact,
certainly
to
a
be
right
paid.
Right.
But we've chosen not to take that right,
Right.
for the sake of keeping people even more content with us. So
Absolutely.
he's standing up for himself, isn't
Certainly.
he? And he has
Absolutely.
to, as an
That's right.
apostle.
Someone did say one time, if you do not defend your honor,
Yeah.
people may think you have none.
I like that. That's exactly what Paul's doing.
that's
Yeah, if you're an apostle, you're very special. In the first verse there, to be an apostle, we have to remind our audience, you have to have seen Jesus literally.
Yes, yes.
You and I have not.
Yes.
The claim to be an apostle at the level of the 12 or
Right.
13, if you include Paul,
Right.
is simply false.
Yes.
You must have the accrediting signs and wonders of an apostle. That marks him out. We don't have those. So the claim to be an apostle at the level of the 12, you could have a secondary sense.
Surely.
If you, I wouldn't use it. I don't recommend you using it at all. But certainly
Because of
not.
confusion, then.
Because of confusion. I think that's most important.
Yeah. We had a right to receive funds, but we've chosen not to do that.
In fact, the Torah of Moses says correctly, this is a good principle, you don't muzzle the ox when it's working. So you don't stifle the poor preacher by not paying him.
That's right. In verse 8 he says, do I say these things on human authority? Does not the law say the same?
Marvelous.
For it is written in the law of Moses, you shall not muzzle an ox when it treads out the corn. So, wow, is it for oxen that God is concerned? Does he not also say these things for our sakes by example? So actually, I think Paul is able to cite this example from the Scriptures and cite them as examples to help his people understand. This really isn't directly in the law speaking about ministers and ministers of the gospel. They didn't have those yet exactly. But he's saying, even the ox are cared for under that system. And so, wow, don't we learn from that? We learn that the oxen who's doing the work would receive sustenance from the very work he's doing. And,
he actually says, was God only thinking about oxen? That'd be silly. Was he not directing the statement at us?
For our benefit.
Yes, for our benefit. So he's drawing from that Mosaic statement a very obvious implication that it's only it's not only about oxen that God is concerned. He's concerned about
the
people.
larger principles there. And
it's very compelling, isn't it? I find myself completely convinced by this.
Yes.
Blown over by it.
So and again, I don't think there's a cause here or occasion for someone to say, well, yeah, but so then the law of Moses is still in effect. Actually, not so much. That's not what he's saying, I think. He's really he's using it as an example. He uses allegories, he uses examples drawn from the law. That's wonderful. And
he's spiritualizing the law in a way.
He is, really.
Okay, Moses might be talking about oxen, you don't starve the animal. But I'll draw from that principle a spiritualization, a fulfillment of the law. In our case, is that we deserve to be paid. Now, he doesn't take advantage of that. That's very clever.
That's right.
Good diplomacy, isn't it?
Excellent.
Very wise.
Yeah. He's answering his critics well.
Indeed. I like that.
So it'd be like somebody coming along and say, if you really were a person of authority and importance, we'd be paying you, but we don't pay you. What a convoluted logic that we're dealing with here. So he goes on to say, it was written for our sake because the plowman should plow in hope, and the thresher thresh in hope of sharing in
the harvest, being paid in this.
Beautiful stuff.
Why not?
Verse 11.
Yes.
If we have sown spiritual things among you, is it too much if we reap material things from you?
Of course not.
That
is the answer, right? Of course it isn't.
Rhetorical question. The answer is obvious. Verse 12, if others share this rightful claim on you, do not we even more? Oh my goodness. We would have a right to do this, certainly.
Yes.
I like that. Yes. Nevertheless, we have not made use of this right, but we endure anything rather than put an obstacle in the way of the gospel of Christ.
Isn't that amazing? His devotion to the importance of the gospel is unmistakable. we haven't exercised our rights yet,
Yes.
because we love the gospel and Jesus and God so much that we can dispense with the
Yes.
money if that's
Yes.
what it takes
Yes.
to keep you guys
Well, there you
happy.
go. That's right. Well, and it's interesting if we read in Philippians, and we can see in other instances where Paul did receive
Yes, rightfully
assistance,
so.
and rightfully so.
course.
It's certainly with these folks, he and Barnabas had foregone the exercise of that right,
Right.
for reasons that they felt like the
love-
gospel would be benefited by not
And was.
doing that.
And-
And
and-
maybe he knew he had critics.
That's right.
And they would have been critical if he had been taking funds, and they're critical for him for not taking funds. You can't make some
Either
people
way,
happy.
I
That's
know.
right, yeah.
But he's doing his best, though,
Yeah.
not to be criticized.
Absolutely, absolutely.
This is what we all do. We all try to present ourselves as being convincing, right?
Yes.
As being plausible.
That's right.
Yeah.
Verse 13, do you not know that those who are employed in the temple service get their food from the temple?
Interesting.
And those who serve at the altar share in the sacrificial offerings. Verse 14, in the same way, the Lord commanded that those who proclaim the gospel should get their living by the gospel. I think the
Very
King James
strong.
says they should live of the gospel.
Right.
I think it
Yeah.
makes wonderful sense.
Marvelous.
I don't know what you say to Paul at this point if you're his critic. What do you think?
Silence.
You say,
You should be
if
silent.
he was taking money, they probably wouldn't like that.
Yes.
But he's not taking money, so they're trying to find a way to pick at that and say,
Yes.
well, he must not have the right authority. He might not, because he's not taking funds.
No, he's very clever here.
Yes,
He's much smarter than his critic.
I think so too. He has that wisdom of God.
Yes, he does.
It's work.
Great advantage. Yeah.
Verse 15. But I have made no use of any of these rights, nor am I writing these things to secure any such provision. For I would rather die than have anyone deprive me of my ground for boasting. For if I preach the gospel, that gives me no ground for boasting. For necessity is laid upon me. Woe to me if I do not preach the gospel. So this is his job. He was given that to do. And he says, woe to me if I don't do that. He said, I'm under mandate, under command to preach it.
Yeah.
But he says, if I do this of my own will, I have a reward. But if not of my own will, I'm still entrusted with a stewardship.
Yes.
What then is my reward? That in my preaching I may present the gospel free of charge, so as not to make full use of my rights in the gospel.
Exactly right.
So he says, I had to preach the gospel. He wasn't given a choice about that.
That's right.
And Jesus entrusted him with that, the Messiah. And now he's saying, I'm doing it free of charge. And he said, that'll give me a little extra something I could say here.
Absolutely, in favor of the gospel.
Yeah.
He's like a sheepdog. If you watch a sheepdog, it's been driven by the character that God puts into a sheepdog to round up the sheep.
Oh, yes.
He's compelled. This is what he does.
Right.
This is what he must do for save his own skin too. Otherwise he's been flat disobedience to God and Jesus if he doesn't preach the gospel.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah.
Verse 19, for though I am free from all, I have made myself a servant to all,
Yeah.
that I might win more of them.
Wow.
To the Jews I became as a Jew, in order to win Jews. To those under the law I became as one under the law, though not being myself under the law, that I might win those under the law.
Yes.
21. To those outside the law I became as one outside the law, not being outside the law of God, but under the law of
Messiah.
Christ, the law of Messiah. Not Moses said that law. Yes.
Only I think in Galatians does he mention that phrase.
Yes, yes.
It's not the law of Moses in the letter, it's the law of Messiah, which even rabbis said the ultimate law of the Messiah is greater than any law of Moses that you might keep, isn't it?
Yes, that's tremendous. But he says that I might win those outside the law.
Yes.
22, the weak I became weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all people, that by all means I might save some. I do it all for the sake of the gospel, that I may share with them in its blessings. So, wow, this is very mighty.
Stuff.
Yeah, and it's interesting then, Paul is saying to those under the law, I became as one under the law. I don't think he considered himself actually under the law in that sense.
No.
The literal law of Moses and all of that.
No.
He was under the Spirit, the law of Spirit and life of Jesus Christ, the Messiah. And yet, if he went among those, his fellow Jews, he said, if it makes them happier, if they'll listen to me preach this gospel, then I will do some of their things and so on.
Exactly right.
But he's not one under the law.
He says that I'm not, in fact, under the law. It's quite clear. But I'll circumcise Timothy if it keeps the Jews quiet.
And people will then listen to us. It won't be that will remove an obstacle.
But they're weak, you know. They're the weak ones.
That's right.
Paul is the strong one.
That's right. Yeah, I like that. But so it's very powerful.
It is powerful stuff.
He's actually. This chapter does have a lot of significance for us, I think.
Oh, very
From
much
the
so.
beginning, he's talking about I'm free. We have the right to receive financial aid and assistance from you and others. We've foregone that, at least in this case in particular, and preached the gospel free of charge and worked, as it were, for their own sustenance. And so he's done well.
Done very well.
Exactly. But then he's making clear that the fact we're not taking assistance from you, financial assistance, doesn't mean we don't have a right to do that. We certainly do. And he's giving all these examples, an example drawn from oxen, for goodness sake. And he's drawing the words of Jesus, who said those who preach the gospel should live of the gospel.
Absolutely, they have a right to it.
Yes, and so he's very strongly presenting his case. Then he says he's free, and then he comes down and he says we're not using these rights by choice, and though I'm free from all, I have made myself a servant to everybody. And
that's very good. Servant. To win them means to save them.
Yes.
Their salvation actually makes perfect sense. Their ultimate immortality or failure to gain immortality is the only thing that counts.
Yes.
The rest is trivia.
Yes, absolutely. So he became all things to all men, as it were. He did everything he could do in order to reach people.
That's right.
That was for the gospel.
Absolutely right. That's one of the phrases that's been memorialized forever, right? All things to all men.
Yes.
Interesting. That's come into our common language.
Yeah, it has. Yeah. Wow.
Very nice.
So, do you suppose this may be where the saying, when in Rome, do as the Romans?
Similar, maybe. Well, it's a similar idea.
Absolutely.
All things to all men, right? I hadn't thought of that. I read it in a commentary this morning, but that is, it's like being saved by the skin of your teeth, which comes from Job. That phrase has become memorable in English.
Yes.
I like that. Powerful.
Yeah. Well, after presenting these things and acquitting himself, I think, quite well.
Yes.
I don't know how anyone's going to say anything about him after this with regard to these points. Then he begins to exhort them again and lift them up, and he says, but listen, do you not know, verse 24, that in a race all the runners run, but only one receives the prize. So run that you may obtain it. Every athlete exercises self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable. Doesn't that flow out of what he's been saying? Why do you do all these things, Paul? Why are you treated as the scum of the earth? Why do you go through all this? Why do you go among the Jews and act as one of them, so to speak? Why do you act as though you were under the law, even though you really aren't? And why do you then subject yourself to all these things? And he's saying, we're running in a race. And he's, I think, pointing that he's running with everything he's got, everything he has. And he's encouraging them to run also.
Because the crown is the crown of immortality.
Yes.
They'll do it to win the gold medal.
Absolutely.
Who cares?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, you swam quicker than anybody else so far on earth.
That's right.
Wonderful. You get your prize. But that's not to be compared with gaining the crown of immortality, literally.
Wow.
That's what they're after.
I love it. So he goes on to say, then he says, they do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable one.
Yeah.
Verse 26.
Yes.
So I do not run aimlessly. I do not box as one beating the air. So he's drawing these great examples, drawn actually from sports in this
Exactly.
case.
He knows about sports.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I discipline my body and keep it under control,
Yes.
lest after preaching to others, I myself should be disqualified. Oh my goodness! Wow.
That's not once saved, always saved.
No, it's not. That's not once saved, always saved at all. I'm afraid. Yeah.
No.
So, but wow, I think we run the race he's talking about is a race to obtain a crown.
Absolutely.
And the crown is the crown of life.
Yeah.
And then, but he's saying you could be disqualified in that race. That means you would not attain that crown. You would not have the crown of life then. I think that's...
Not so hard, is it?
No.
Imagine trying to claim once saved, always saved
Oh my
out
goodness,
of that
yeah.
text. It's
No.
just absurd
Doesn't,
at any level.
Doesn't work.
No.
Just doesn't work.
No.
So I did read somewhere, I don't remember where now, but at Corinth, were some quite, or near there was quite some famous games that they had, sort of like the Olympic games.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But the Isthmian games,
Oh, yeah.
so they were on the isthmus there.
Oh, on the isthmus. Yes,
And they had annual games that were very great. So perhaps Paul had seen that.
I'm
And
sure.
He was there, we think,
Yes.
for probably a year and a half.
Yes.
Maybe he'd been there before, we don't know.
Indeed.
But he was there at least in the preaching of the gospel.
They would
for a year and a
understand that,
half.
wouldn't they?
Yeah. So that made sense, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Well, how serious then should we take our efforts? And
Presumably maximum, back
Yes.
there in verse 24. We all agree, do we not, that there are many runners in a race, but only one gets the prize. So run to your maximum capacity
yes,
so that you may win.
yes. Exactly.
I would think so.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine a swimmer in the Olympic Games
Yes.
doing it half-heartedly?
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Hardly.
Those folks give everything they've got to achieving those things, and
Yes.
Paul is exhorting these folks, and us by extension, I guess. But
I would think
he's
so.
exhorting us to give it all you've got.
Yes.
Go for it.
Yes.
Wow.
The lukewarm Christian is not a Christian, in fact.
No.
That's a failed Christian. There's no such thing as being lukewarm. Or you better shape up or not reckon to be saved. I was thinking only that he's writing to people who probably couldn't read, many of them.
That's true, yeah.
So the level of engagement is certainly must be. He's not writing over the heads of his audience. He's too clever for that.
Right.
But the arguments are well expressed, extremely well expressed, powerfully, aren't they? But they are nevertheless quite intelligible. Not something to argue about, something to be believed.
Well, when you think about it, look how easily he proves his points.
Yes.
The oxen thing.
Of course.
Who's going to say, well, that's not right? He's got it there, And he even quotes the words of Jesus, which again, he's very familiar with the words of Jesus.
The spiritual seed, if I've sowed that, that's
right.
the parable of the sower, of course. That works perfectly.
But,
No, it's wonderful. In some ways, one can over-explain this. Is that right? Its impact
right.
speaks for itself.
It's very simple, really.
Very straightforward. But it's lovely to hear it read aloud too. Isn't
Yes,
it?
yeah.
Makes an even greater impact.
Wow. So apparently it was an interesting circumstance in which he has critics accusing him because he wasn't taking money. Is that what you
absolutely. Well, I'm not sure if the reverse would be true. Certainly critics who would accuse him of taking money wrongly.
Yeah.
But he's simply exercising his right. Maybe there were some.
Yeah.
Maybe the devil will criticize you, whatever you do.
Either way,
He points the finger.
That's right.
And Paul is suffering that. Jesus was criticized even by his own family. So that's quite clear. Yeah, I don't know if it actually says, Paul, you really ought to be taking money.
Yes.
But certainly, if he did take it, which he chooses not to, he would be entirely within his rights. Yes.
This is my defense to those who would examine me.
Yes.
We have a right to do all these things.
Absolutely.
Including
a
right to...
Right. Well, you may be right. Maybe some are saying, he should be taking money in his way.
It's a strange world.
Very strange.
That's right.
Yes.
Wow.
Very strange. But the truth will be criticized, unfortunately.
No matter what.
Yeah. Yes. Inevitably.
And we should as Christians and who are seeking to follow in the path of Paul and Jesus and others, that should be our objective, then we shouldn't be surprised when we meet opposition coming from every direction.
No.
And unfair opposition.
Unfair often because they will tend to narrow our point of view to the extent that we're the only people who ever thought of this. You see, one way to beat your opponent is to say, well, you idiot, nobody else ever imagined that.
Yes.
That is patently not true when we talk about Milton and Isaac Newton and John Locke.
Of course, yes.
And 5 American presidents
Yes.
who were incensed, as we are, against this very difficult doctrine of God.
Absolutely.
A mass of contemporary British Anglican Unitarians.
Yeah, absolutely.
The myth of God incarnate, all these people. And you can't just dismiss all those. Well, they're all flaming liberals. That doesn't prove anything. You can believe something's right, something's wrong. Each doctrine stands on its own. But we are not inventing anything new, heaven forbid. I'd be terrified.
Yeah. Well, it's a little late in the day to be inventing these things, but they're already there. It's wonderful.
When you find them, when you're provoked into studying them.
Well, that's right.
If you choose never to look at it, you may never see it.
There are none so blind as those who will not see.
Who will not see. And I think one admits that the pressures for not seeing are very great.
Yes.
If in fact your leadership in the church is threatened, if you change your mind on some of these doctrines, I see the difficulty.
Yeah.
If your family are going to abandon you because you change your mind, I see the difficulty. But Jesus, I remind you, is uncompromising, where he says that unless you give up everything you've got, you can't even be a disciple. You can't join the class. You can't sign up for the course until you're willing to give up everything.
That's right.
How uncompromising is that?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. And he's the fellow we're following. We're supposed to be following. Yes. Right.
Very demanding. No wonder people prefer to believe only in the death and resurrection of Jesus and his teachings. I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah.
That's a different issue.
If you start believing his teachings, then that begins to become a matter of great personal responsibility.
Absolutely.